All right, what's going on, everybody? Been a while since I put a video out. Gonna go over some, hopefully do a series here of different baits as the season goes on. Right now, fishing jerk baits for the most part, so I thought I'd do a video on what I do, what I like set up on jerk bait, what rod, how to make them suspend, how to make them sink, that type of stuff. Just my preference. Everybody fishes them a little bit different, but so in my opinion, you basically got obviously three types of jerk baits. You got one that will float, suspend, or sink. Most of them that you buy will say suspend. I found that the majority of them, when you take them out of the box and actually check them, they'll either float or sink. They won't suspend, or at least the way that I want them to suspend. So when you take them out of the box, I fill the sink full of cold water, put them in there, check them, or you can check them at the lake, either way. But if the jerk bait, in my opinion, if it sinks straight out of the box, set it to the side, because it's going to be very hard to make that bait suspend. If you take the hooks off and it floats, great, then you might be able to make it suspend, but most of the time you can't. Most of the time, if it sinks, it's just going to be a sinking jerk bait, which is fine, and I'll go over when I like to use those. My opinion, if you take one out of the box and it floats, that's a good thing. Because if it floats, then I can make it suspend. You can go over and do a couple different things. So, and if it suspends, that's great. You don't have to do anything to it. Then you're good to go. But let's start off with it. If you take it out of the box and it does float up, there's several different ways that you can make that bait suspend. One of the best ways that I've found, Storm Lures makes suspended dots and suspended strips, and basically they're just like a lead tape. And you can see here, you can take that and play on the bait, and it's just a tinkering deal. You've just got to add, one strip, or add a little bit, see if it works. Like I said, I'll take these, put them in the kitchen sink, fill it full of ice cold water, push that bait down in the water, and see if it suspends. If it sinks, you can take a razor knife and just start shaving off a little bit of that. If it still floats, you can add a little bit more to it, and it's just give and take until you get that bait suspending just right. My opinion is you want it to be able to take that bait down in the water column and let it set, and if it is set there for at least, my preference, 15-20 seconds, or if it just set there, that's even better, and not sink. If anything, maybe slowly start to rise is better, but to me, I'll mess with them until they suspend absolutely just perfect and set there. If they sink, like I said, then you just shave a little bit of lead off of them. Another method that you can do, and I used to do this years ago before I just had found the suspending strips and the dots, is you can take lead solder and actually put it on the shank of the hook. To me, I don't prefer to do that, just because it gets in the way sometimes of the actual barb. But with these jerk baits, you've got 3 hooks, so and if you wrap it tight enough, then you're okay on that. It won't be in the way of anything. But this is a preference that I try not to use anymore, but it's an old school method that we used to use years ago. All right, next I'll go over when to use floating, when to use suspending, when do I use sinking jerk bait. So let's start off, if I'm fishing deeper water, over a brush pile, over a rock pile, over in a log, something that's in deeper water. Most of these jerk baits only dive 5 foot. Some of the Smithwick, the deeper diving ones, will get down to 8-10 foot with lighter line. But a lot of times, especially with forward-looking sonar, live scope, you can see those fish and they'll suspend down deeper. And when they're in that situation, that's, to me, is the best time to use a sinking jerk bait, because you can throw it out past, and especially with live scope, you can watch that bait and get it down to the depth that they need. But other than that, that's about the only time that I prefer to use it. If you're fishing it over grass or anything and it's sinking down, a lot of times, unless you're watching on a live scope, you'll end up hanging it in the grass too much, as opposed to staying suspended over the top of it. So the majority of the time, I fish with get them set up to where they'll suspend, and just depending on the day, you'll have to just experiment. Sometimes they'll want it a little bit deeper, like this Rogue. It's a 8 foot, so it gets down 8 to 10 foot. Some days this is a little bit deep, so you're fishing below the fish as opposed to fishing above to where they're looking up and coming to it. But the majority of the time, I use the ones that suspend that 5 to 8 foot range. Floating, about the only time that I'll use a floating suspended jerkbait is kind of post spawn, or even in the summertime. So when you're working at that bait, it's a lot faster, and when you pause, it floats up. So really, you're not giving it much time to stop and float. During the wintertime, when you fish it, to me, if you stop that bait and it slowly rises up, a lot of times they won't come up to get it, especially if it floats too fast. If it floats really slow, you're okay. And I'm talking if you're pausing it for 15-20 seconds and it moves up an inch or so, that's not really going to affect them. I'm talking about when it floats up, in 3 or 4 seconds, it's moved up a foot or two. And if that's the case, I'll put that off to the side, either make it suspend or just mark it and use it for post spawn when those fish move back out, or if they're schooling in the summer. All right, next I'll go over what days are best to fish in the wintertime that I prefer. To me, if you get an extreme cold snap, and I'm talking temperatures down in the 20s or below, so you get 4 or 5 days or even a week of that extreme cold, and a lot of times the lake will lock up. That will usually generate a shad die-off. Once that freeze goes through and you get 3 or 4 days of a warming trend, so you're back not necessarily in the 40s, but just mid 30s, then after about the 3rd day of that, when you can get out, that is usually a really good time to catch those fish. They seem like they move up. You get a shad die off, and those fish are really feeding. Whether it's cloudy or sunny, we go back and forth every year of usually those bluebird sunny calm days are really good, but cloudy days can be just as good, especially once you have found the fish. It seems like on the sunny days that if it's going to be calm, usually you have to give it a few hours in the sunshine, and those fish will suspend a little bit higher in the water column. Or on cloudy days, they'll still suspend, but they'll hang closer to the cover, whether that's grass or a lay down or on that side of it. But definitely don't like fishing if the wind's going to blow. You can fish on extremely windy days, especially with spot lock anymore. And if you know where those fish are suspended on a point or on a certain edge of something, you can pull them there and spot lock and at least hold the boat in place. Without spot lock, you're constantly fighting the trolling motor, trying to hold it in place. If you catch a fish, you're blowing all around. And a lot of times on a windy day, you have a tendency to overwork the bait. So instead of working it slow and figuring out the cadence that they want for that day, a lot of times you're just moving it too fast for those fish, and a lot of times you just don't catch them. So to me, I prefer bluebird sunny days are really great, but to me the key is low wind or no wind at all is my preference. And then if it's sunny or cloudy, then based on that, I'll select the color that works the best and go that route. But like I said, if it's extremely windy and you're on a new body of water, or you haven't been out there in a while and you're trying to find where those fish are at, sometimes it can be a little bit of a nightmare to catch them. But if you have found the fish, or you have an idea where they're at, and you got spot lock, it makes it super easy to set in one spot and fish it. Especially if you get the wind to your back, you can make long casts and you can work the bait slow, keeping your rod tip pointed at it, and the boat's not moving around and you're not dragging the bait. A lot of times when it's windy, you'll jerk, and then as you're waiting, the boat's drifting, so then you constantly have tension on your line and you're pulling your bait and not working the way that it needs to be. I hope some of these tips have helped any of those out there that are new to jerkbait fishing or just gathering information. I know a lot of times we all kind of have our own ways and tricks and tips that we do. This is just some of my preferences that works for me, may or may not work for you, but hopefully it gives you some information or insight to those that are out there that don't get the chance to fish a jerkbait the way we do here in the Midwest, especially when it's super cold and throughout the winter, that December, January, February time frame, when the water temperature's in the mid-30s. So go out, give it a try, and hope you enjoy the video. Thanks.